question there, not to interrupt, but was, and you said without the proper background check,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about the need. Obviously, the background checks there required in other parts of the law, along with the proficiency test. What I am asking is a need the ability to exercise your right?
Is your need the ability to
Is
exercise
a
your right to
need.
carry?
Would a need be defined by you as somebody saying, I need to carry a firearm because I want to exercise my right?
Yeah, I thought I answered that, but I'll say it again. I don't have a problem issue. I think you have a right to carry a firearm.
So would you issue based on that need?
Yeah, as long as somebody was not part of a prohibited category.
All right,
For all
so,
lawful purposes. Basically, you can request for all lawful purposes.
All lawful
Zero
purposes.
carry as in Massachusetts.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, if that's the, I'm
all
sorry.
right, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that's I'm gonna make that a little simpler, I guess. We have a question over here.
Prohibited categories. We've had Janet Napolitano define a pretty big prohibited category just recently in terms of domestic terrorists. What defines your prohibited categories with relation to that?
Sure. Somebody who has serious mental health illnesses, someone who has been convicted of a violent crime or a domestic crime. Many of this is federal. Some of this is federal law too. Obviously, there's prohibitions on domestic violence. People who have those kinds of convictions carrying. There's prohibitions on people who are convicted felons. We have to, obviously, we want to make sure that we're not turning over and issuing permits to people who are suffering from severe mental health illness and are under treatment and are not the appropriate people to carry.
What about on the basis of profiling? Because that's what's happening at the federal level. Returning veterans are considered potential domestic terrorist risks.
Okay, well, that's the first I've heard of that, but I from my perspective, all
Yes, that's right out
Okay.
in Napolitano's office.
right, well, for me, returning veterans are far from terrorists.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and in fact, you bring up something which I want to just mention for a moment. As Attorney General, I'm going to be very sensitive to the fact that we have returning veterans coming back to this state, and many of them have seen the horrors of war, and they have some very important and special consideration that needs to be given in circumstances when they get entangled in our criminal justice system. I've seen it. You see situations in which they come back. This is not the normal world that they're used to any longer. They get involved in the criminal justice system, and I think we need to do a better job for our veterans, not only educating our prosecutors about the kinds of things that veterans come back suffering from, whether that's PTSD or traumatic brain injuries, but we need to make sure that the people in our court system and the people in the rest of our criminal justice system, including our law enforcement, pay recognition to the fact that they may be dealing with a vet who's come back with a combat-related injury or mental health problem, and we have to recognize that in dealing with them.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah, Eric, you initiate legal action, I guess, to protect the citizens of Rhode Island. And what I was wondering is if there was, back to the healthcare thing, if we have this mandate, I mean, where do you stand on if we choose not to participate? I mean, there's talk that there's going to be legal action against us if we choose not to participate in this healthcare reform or health.
The individual citizen, you mean?
Yes, yes.
The Attorney General represents, and I often say that, you know, as an individual, it's the Attorney General who has to stand up for the individual's rights. Part of that is standing up, part of that is having the backing of the legislature. Obviously, the Attorney General has to enforce whatever law is passed by the legislature. So, if the legislature is going to pass a law which is going to dictate what Rhode Island is going to do in terms of the national health care or whatever the mandate is, then it would be my job as Attorney General to defend the state on that issue.
Would that go as far as forced vaccination?
If the legislature is going to provide us a law from the legislature, from the state
So if the
legislature.
state of Rhode Island says everyone in Rhode Island must receive the H1 flu vaccine, we would have to take it. If we objected, we would be forced to do it, and you would uphold that.
I would have no, I have to enforce the law of the state of Rhode
Even
Island.
when
I would have to
even when you think the laws
enforce,
are wrong.
I would have to enforce the law of the state of Rhode Island. So the answer to your question is go out there and make sure that we get the representatives and the senators that are elected to stop it. That's the key. That's the key.
I'm sorry, but that's passing the buck.
Okay? It's the job of the Attorney General's office is to enforce the law as passed by your legislators, not make it.
That is how it works.
No, excuse me, I
Wait,
don't think they're clear at all. His job is not to make the laws.
That's
His
right.
job is to enforce the laws, whether they be federal laws or state laws. He can't just decide
So,
willy-nilly when he
so
thinks he's...
even if it's unconstitutional,
It's his
the law.
job to enforce the constitutional law, it's his job to enforce federal law and state law. Whatever you think, the law, the legislature and the Congress and the Senate makes the law. So keep your columns separate. That's all I have to say.
Yes.
Eric, glad I was able to get around here. Could you explain to someone who's worked in the AG's office before, what mechanics or laws were allowed to the AG's office where he could have gotten involved earlier in like the case of the resource recovery, like when the governor,
Sure.
commissioned the audit for him?
Yep.
And what would have prevented the AG's office from working in concert with the governor at the early stages when he ordered the investigation or the insight or the audit? And the other thing is, I have the misfortune of living in Providence. I was very upset by the AG's stance that, there's no improprieties, given with the, Jack Cicilline's check in the Soprano case, and it just seems that if enough time was given by the AG's office to allow the office of the mayor to cover all bases before he ever spoke a single word about it. Do we have a state law that would have allowed him to get in on a very early investigation into that?
Yeah, sure. This is what I'm talking about in terms of having a public corruption task force in the state of Rhode Island. The part of the problem with the landfill. Now, the governor ordered the audit. It went from 1999 to 2007, so that's 8 years. And prior to that, we have two attorney generals that covered the span of that period: Sheldon Whitehouse and Patrick Lynch. All right, and what we've had and why we have a situation in the landfill case, the authorities telling us that we can't go after the people who are responsible for that, is because of the statute of limitations has passed. I say that the problem is because we've never had public corruption as being a priority of the Attorney General's office. They have a single prosecutor that he assigned after the fact to the issue of the landfill case. And if you listen to the comments of the Attorney General's office, he said it, I think, on Buddy Cianci. He said, well, we were waiting to use the audit as a tool. While you were sitting back waiting for the audit to be used as a tool, the people who were responsible got away with it. So we have to have a public corruption task force. And when I say that, I mean at least 3 seasoned prosecutors with an investigator who understands what financial crimes are and can be in there at ground one. We need to have a tip line where people can report this kind of goings on. Now, and the example that I use is if Jim Hummel can do it, why can't the Attorney General of the state of Rhode Island do it? So I am convinced that with a public corruption unit in this state saying we're done with it, we're done with it. We are going to go after you whether you're at the bottom of the pile or you're sitting high atop the throne in this state of political power. We are going to go after you if you betray the public trust. And having the resources of dedicated prosecutors, a financial forensic investigator, and being there to be involved from the very beginning with either the state police, and let's not forget the municipal police, because there is corruption at the municipal level which is costing us substantial amounts of money that we can't afford to lose.